There is a room, and it is full of the most brilliant men in Europe. Every one of them is waiting for a single man to speak. He is the most celebrated mind of his century. He is standing at the front of the most gifted assembly his country has ever produced, and he is presiding over all of it. His name is Isaac Newton. By every measure that matters to the world, Isaac Newton has never been less alone. By every measure that matters to him, he has rarely been more so. This is the story of how the same mind that could see further than anyone alive somehow never learned to close the distance to the people standing right next to him. And it is about what Carl Jung, 2 centuries later, names as the exact reason why. Stay with it, because by the end, you will have 3 things Newton was never given: the name for the gap, the mechanism underneath it, and the one thing he never got the chance to do about it. Because here is the part nobody tells you about a mind like his. The single trait that makes it extraordinary is the exact trait that leaves it alone in a crowd, and the whole rest of this is the story of how one becomes the other. Start in Woolsthorpe, Lincolnshire, a farmhouse, a widowed mother, and a boy she expects to run the family land. She pulls him out of school for exactly that. He is hopeless at it. He lets the sheep wander into the neighbor's corn while he sits with a book, and he is quietly, ferociously brilliant at almost everything that is not farming. Instead, he builds things. Sundials, exact enough that people reportedly come to read the time off the shadows he has drawn on a wall. Small working machines, water clocks, tiny mills turned by a live mouse. He does all of it alone, and he does it well, long before anyone around him has a word for either the aloneness or the brilliance. Competence becomes the whole currency of his life, the one language in which he is fluent and fully himself. And the terrible thing about a currency that good is that you never once feel poor while you are spending everything else to earn it. Understand that there is nothing wounded here yet. This is a mind that is simply more at ease taking a clock apart by itself than sitting in a room of other children. And it works for him. It gets results the others cannot touch. If you were ever the child who would rather figure the thing out alone than ask, who found other people slower and somehow more exhausting than the problem in front of you, you already know this feeling from the inside. At that age, it reads as pure advantage. The wound is invisible because there is no wound yet. That is exactly the trap. The same trait that is about to make this boy immortal is the one that will quietly cost him everything else. And it will do it so gradually that he never once sees the bill. Some nights the screen is the wrong place for this. If you'd rather just listen, Surreal Mind is on Spotify now. The words "In the Dark," wherever you are, links in the description. In 1665, the plague reaches Cambridge and the university closes its doors. Newton, 22 years old, is sent home to Woolsthorpe. He stays there, mostly alone, for close to 2 years. And in that isolation, he does something the history of thought almost never sees in one person. He lays the groundwork for the calculus, a new mathematics of change itself. He takes a glass prism and works out that white light is not simple at all, but a mixture of every color, splitting it and recombining it in a room he has darkened for the purpose. And he begins the long chain of thought that will end in universal gravitation, one law reaching from a falling apple all the way to the orbit of the moon. Later, he will call these his years of wonders. Because there is no one left to interrupt him, therefore, the sharpest mind of his century does the most important work of his life without a single collaborator in the room. No rival to argue with, no colleague to answer to, no friend at the door, and no one, in 2 whole years, to change him even slightly, or to be changed by him. Notice what is being set here, and notice how the world responds to it. Far from punishing him, It is about to reward him more lavishly than it has rewarded almost anyone. Solitude is far more than the place Newton is comfortable. It is where he is most completely himself, and where he is at his most useful to every person who will ever come after him. Therefore, he never questions it. Why would he? It has never once let him down. Cambridge reopens. Newton returns. And before long, he holds the Lucasian Professorship of Mathematics, one of the most prestigious chairs in the country, the same seat that centuries later will belong to Stephen Hawking. He lectures to an almost empty room. Some terms the benches are all but bare. By several accounts, he reads his lectures out anyway, aloud, to the walls, to whoever failed to come. But here is the part that is easy to miss, and it is the part that matters. He does not fight this. He does not grieve it either. The world has already stopped asking anything relational of him, and he never once asks it of himself. Therefore, the muscle that would need an audience, that would even notice the absence of one, simply never gets built, and a capacity you never use does not sit quietly ready for later. It withers in the dark. Hold on to that, because you are about to watch it come true across the whole length of a human life. And understand why this is the dangerous kind of problem. A pain you feel sends you looking for a fix. A lack you have never once felt sends you nowhere at all. Newton is not suffering here. That is precisely the trouble. The bill is running up in a currency he cannot yet feel, and it will not present itself for another 20 years. I am going to step out of the story for a moment, on purpose. There is a framework that explains precisely what is about to happen to this man. Newton will never hear it. It will not exist for another 250 years. Consider this the one advantage you have that he never did. In 1921, in a book called Psychological Types, Carl Jung describes what happens inside a mind that trains one function to an extraordinary pitch. He is blunt about the intellectual type in particular. When thinking takes the throne, Jung writes, feeling gets repressed, and along with it go the aesthetic life, the taste for beauty, the friendships. Those are the first things sacrificed, and they are sacrificed early, before the person is old enough to know a trade is even being made. And the opposite capacity, the one the mind never exercises, does not politely wait its turn to grow. It stays behind in what Jung, writing in 2 essays on analytical psychology, calls an archaic state, primitive and undeveloped, frozen at the age it was abandoned, while its counterpart grows into genius. He is describing exactly this kind of mind long before he ever meets this kind of story. Now the threshold, 1672 Tucson. Newton finally submits his work on light and color to the Royal Society. For the first time in his life, his mind has to exist inside a room of peers who can see it, judge it, and talk back to it. Understand what going public actually costs a man like this. Up to now, his work has only ever had to satisfy the truth. From this moment on, it also has to travel through other people, and other people are the one medium in which he has no fluency at all. Therefore, the room is about to hand him 3 men. Remember them, because they are the whole second act, and each one is a different door he cannot walk through. If you have ever been completely comfortable alone, and then found yourself genuinely unsure what to do the moment real closeness was finally within reach, leave a comment with just this: the room was never the problem. The moment Newton steps into the room hands him those 3 men. All 3 are real. All 3 are documented. And each one is a different way of failing at the same thing. The first is Robert Hooke. Hooke reads Newton's paper on light and criticizes it, sharply and in public. And here is the tell that Jung will name almost word for word 2 centuries later. Jung writes that the rigid thinker, cornered on the one function he cannot defend, turns touchy, retreats into a defensive isolation, and lashes back with what Jung calls vicious, personal retorts. Watch Newton do precisely that. Being right on the science changes nothing about how he handles being challenged on it. He is so unsettled by the confrontation that he withdraws from public scientific debate for years, threatens to stop publishing altogether, rather than sit for one more week inside the discomfort of being argued with. The criticism went straight past his work and landed on the one function he had never built a defense for, and a person with no defense there does not negotiate. He retreats behind the wall and pulls the wall up after him. The second is Nicolas Fatio de Duillier. Around 1689, a real friendship begins. Warm letters, real affection. A younger mathematician, gifted in his own right, whom Newton writes to with a tenderness he shows almost no one else in his life, and whom he tries at one point to persuade to come and live near him. This is the single relationship in Newton's adult years that looks, from the outside, like it might actually be close. Keep an eye on this one. Of the three men, Fatio is the only one who was ever let all the way in, and that is exactly why he is the one who is about to do the most damage on the way out. The third is Gottfried Leibniz. On the far side of Europe, working entirely alone, Leibniz arrives at his own version of the calculus. Rather than share the credit, rather than let the historical record simply settle who reached it first, Newton escalates. What follows is a bitter public priority dispute that will grind on for decades and consume both men until one of them is in the grave. It is the same reflex that drove him behind the wall from Hooke, only this time turned outward instead of inward, aimed at a rival across a continent. A calmer man lets an unresolved tie simply stand. Newton would rather spend himself down to nothing than sit inside the discomfort of one, and the dispute grinds on for years after Leibniz is in the ground and Newton is an old man. Look at the three of them side by side, and one thing lines up. With Hooke, he withdraws. With Fatio, he attaches, then ruptures. With Leibniz, he attacks and cannot let go. Three completely different behaviors. And underneath all three sites the same single incapacity. A man with no practiced way to simply stay in contact with another person when the contact gets difficult. Distance comes easily to him, and so does open warfare. What defeats him every time is the ordinary middle, the staying. Here is where this video refuses the easy version of itself. None of these three is being punished by the world for being too intelligent to be understood. Two of them are giants in their own right. What changes from one man to the next is only ever what Newton does, once he is in the room with them. The room stays constant across all three. The one thing that moves is him. Which one sounds like you? Hooke, where you go quiet and disengage instead of working it out. Fatio, the one real bond you are almost afraid to test. Or Leibniz, the rivalry you cannot seem to put down. And here is a tell you can start testing this week, long before the end of this video. Watch for the exact moment a conversation stops being a problem to solve and turns into just a conversation to stay inside. The trained, differentiated mind reaches for the exit right there, toward the clean conclusion, the fix, the answer that lets it leave the room intact. That reach is the undeveloped side of the mind going quiet, and once you have caught it happening in yourself, in real time, you cannot unfeel it. Through the early 1690s, the Fatio friendship deepens. Sustained letters, back and forth for years, real warmth. Newton, of all people, uncharacteristically open on the page, worrying over the younger man's health, his money, his travels, the cough he cannot shake. If any part of this mind is starting to sound familiar, subscribe. This channel exists to name the parts of a sharp mind that nobody ever hands you a manual for. Something specific is happening in those letters, and it has almost nothing to do with intellect. This is the one place in Newton's entire adult life where everything about closeness that his self-sufficient mind never had to build is finally being asked to actually perform under load. And Jung has a chilling note about this exact predicament. In the Tavistock lectures, he says the intellectual holds his feeling down with, in his words, an iron hand, precisely because that feeling is so undeveloped that it leaves him wide open, easy to cheat, easy to flood, easy to throw. Therefore, the moment real intimacy asks anything of Newton, it is asking the weakest, least practiced part of him to carry the single heaviest weight a human being ever carries. He has spent 50 years making sure this part of him never had to lift anything at all. Now, without any warning, it is being handed the whole load at once. There is a specific dread in that for anyone who has lived it. The dread is of being found out, mid-reach, with no idea at all what you are doing. In 1693, the Fatio friendship comes, in the words of the historical record itself, to an abrupt and unexplained end. Nobody fully knows why. And this video is not going to invent a reason for you, because the honest blank in the record is more truthful than any story I could put inside it. And it is also just what happened. At the same time, Newton suffers what looks by every surviving account like a nervous breakdown. He writes wild, paranoid, accusatory letters to two of the men closest to him, Samuel Pepys and John Locke. In one, he accuses Locke of trying to entangle him with women. He tells Pepys he is withdrawing from his friends entirely and wishes them dead. He drives the people who got near him off, in writing, with both hands, and then apologizes weeks later saying he had not slept and did not know what he was putting on the page. Sit inside the timing of that, because the timing is the entire point. The one time in his life, real intimacy got close enough to actually require something of him. It did not get gradually harder and then slowly easier, the way a practice thing does. It broke all at once, and it broke aimed straight at the people he had let closest, at Fatio and Locke and Pepys, at the handful he had finally allowed inside. The part he had never built detonated in the exact spot where he had, for once, let someone in. And here is the detail that should stop you cold. Newton recovers. Within a year or two, his mind is sharp again, and he goes on to run the Royal Mint and to preside over British science for another 3 decades at the height of his powers. The instrument comes back at full strength. Fatio does not come back, and neither does the closeness. His genius returned whole, while the part of him that had finally reached for another person stayed broken underneath it, and almost nobody watching from the outside could have told. If you have watched yourself do exactly this to the one relationship that mattered most, you already know the shape of it before I finish drawing it. Say so in a comment if it is true. Just that sentence. I have watched myself do this to the one that mattered. Now, the understanding. There is no triumph here. Newton never gets one. This part gets handed straight to you because he never receives it. Jung's account, in Psychological Types, runs like this. A mind that trains one function to a genius pitch pays for it directly, in the coin of its opposite. Jung describes the intellectual amputating feeling until the inner life goes, in his own word, sterile, until the man is functionally deaf to the entire relational world around him, able to solve the room while missing every person in it. Amputate the feeling, and it sinks rather than disappearing, going underground, crude and unpracticed, under enormous pressure, primitive exactly because it was never allowed to grow up alongside the thinking. It is a 50-year-old man's mind carrying a 5-year-old's heart and neither one knows the other is there. Because that pressure has nowhere to drain, therefore it obeys a principle Jung names enantiodromia. What is suppressed keeps accumulating quietly for decades until it forces its way out as its own opposite, all at once, rather than integrating a little at a time. The rule is almost physical. The harder a thing is held down, the more violently it returns, and it returns on a schedule nobody chose. The dam holds and holds and holds, giving no warning at all, and then, in a single afternoon, it is simply gone. 1693 is what enantiodromia looks like printed on a calendar. 50 years of undeveloped relational capacity, switched on for the first time by one real friendship, and then erupting instead of maturing. And there is a modern echo of this, and I want to be exact about where it comes from, because it is not Jung, and I will not fold it into his voice. In 2005, 4 psychologists, Judd, James Hawkins, Isabit, and Kashima, published a study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. They found that people consistently rate the same person lower in warmth the higher they rate that person in competence, and the other way around. The research describes it as a trade-off between the two, a seesaw the observers cannot seem to help riding. The more clearly a room sees how capable you are, the harder it becomes for that same room to feel you as warm. You get admired at the precise rate you stop getting approached. Now hold all of that against the man. Newton spends everything he has becoming the most precise instrument his century produces, because every available unit of that capacity is poured into perception. Therefore, there is almost nothing left over for the slow, unglamorous, inefficient work of being known by another human being. The world gets the calculus. The world gets the laws of motion, the reflecting telescope, the composition of light itself. Fatio and Locke and Pepys get whatever is left over, and by 1693 there is almost nothing left over to give. That cost has a name, and the name is mine rather than Jung's. It is what I call the unpracticed half. The undeveloped, archaic opposite of a great mind's one great strength, and the plain, structural price of becoming that sharp at anything at all. And now you can see the double bind the intelligent mind actually lives inside, because two forces are pulling the same direction at once. From the outside, the seesaw the 2005 study describes means the sharper the room clocks you, the less warmth it can feel from you, so it admires and does not approach. From the inside, the function you never used has stayed archaic, so even when someone does approach, the tool you would need to meet them is the one tool that was never built. The world stops reaching for you, and the one part of you that could reach back was left in the dark. That is why it feels like being alone in a crowd rather than simply alone. The crowd is right there, and the one thing that would let him cross to it is the thing that was never built. Jung's own word for the way out is individuation. It means letting the two functions finally share one clock face, so the racing hand slows just enough for the rusted one to start to move. Nobody is asking Newton to surrender the sharp mind in order to become a warm one. The genius stays. It simply stops being allowed to eat everything else alive. Newton never got there. He never even got the map. Therefore, the rest of this is not about him. Late in Newton's life, something small and real begins to thaw. His half-niece, Catherine Barton, comes to live in his household and runs it as his hostess. A letter of his to her survives from 1700. It is warm. It asks after her health, frets over a fever she has had, tells her to take care of herself. It closes, "Your very loving uncle." Let me be honest about the size of that. It is small, it is late, and it is real. It is proof the capacity in him was never actually zero, that the rusted hand could still under the right conditions, move a little. It had only gone almost entirely unused for the 60 years standing in front of it, and a thing unused for 60 years does not come back as what it might have been. It comes back as a fraction, gratefully received. And notice the one condition that finally let it move. Catherine Barton did not arrive as someone Newton had to court or persuade or risk himself for. She arrived already inside the walls, as family, in a role with no negotiation in it. The closeness that required no reaching is the only closeness the unpracticed half could manage, which tells you something exact and a little heartbreaking about the whole mechanism. His capacity for warmth was real, but it could only survive where the reaching had already been done for him, and almost every relationship worth having asks you to do the reaching yourself. In 1703, Newton becomes president of the Royal Society, a post he will hold until the day he dies. This is the literal summit of being surrounded, the most gifted assembly in the country, and he sits at the very head of it. The pattern holds anyway. He makes a lasting enemy of John Flamsteed, the astronomer royal, by publishing Flamsteed's own hard-won observations without his permission. The feud with Leibniz never heals. Leibniz dies in 1716, still estranged, and Newton reportedly remarks that he had taken great satisfaction in breaking the man's heart. And Jung has a line about this exact room. Put 100 of the most intelligent people together in a group, he writes in a 1955 letter, and the result is one big fathead. Years before that, in a 1938 interview, he says a crowd of the ablest individuals alive carries the collective intelligence of an alligator, that it sinks straight to the level of a stupid mob. Elsewhere he puts it harder still, that any large assembly of admirable people takes on the morality and the mind of an unwieldy, stupid, and violent animal. A crowd like this was never going to rise to meet a mind like Newton's, and by now you know he had no way to meet it from his own side either. Both things are true in the very same instant, and sitting at the exact center of the crowd changes neither one. This is the answer the title has been circling. The loneliness in a crowd has almost nothing to do with the crowd being cruel to you. It comes from something quieter. The part of you that could actually meet a crowd is the one part you were never given the chance to practice. And a crowd, Jung says, is the last place on earth that will ever help you build it. This is the part the story does not get to fix, and I am not going to pretend it does. He reaches the precise height of being surrounded, and the pattern that cost him Fatio, that nearly cost him his own mind, is still fully, quietly intact underneath the honors. In 1727, Isaac Newton dies, and the crowd finally arrives. He lies in state for 8 days in Westminster Abbey, the first scientist ever buried there. His pall is carried by the Lord Chancellor, by 2 dukes, and by 3 earls. Most of the Royal Society walks behind. It is, by a wide margin, the largest crowd of his entire life. He is surrounded completely for the first and only time in his life, and he is not there for any of it. Here is where the story stops being about him. Newton never got the 250 years it took before anyone could finally name what was happening to him. You just got it in half an hour. If a room has ever admired your mind completely while somehow never once getting any closer to you, that gap has a name now. And unlike him, you are hearing it while you can still do something about it. Here is the one thing to do, starting this week. Once a day on purpose, do the small relational thing the efficient mind always waves off as a waste of time. Finish a conversation instead of solving it. Ask a second question instead of landing the conclusion. Stay inside another person's unresolved feeling for 1 extra minute without reaching for the fix. Tell one person one true thing about yourself that you would normally keep behind the wall. It will feel inefficient and slightly pointless and a little exposed. That feeling is the muscle. That is the unpracticed half, getting its first honest reps. And unlike a proof, it has no final answer to arrive at. You just keep taking the reps. Newton was never once overlooked. He was, for most of his life, never really known. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.